These are the things we live for.
Please welcome to the stage Engineer Badr Mohammed Al-Meer, Group CEO of the Qatar Airways Group; Jane Herdlika, former CEO of Virgin Australia; and Datuk Captain Izham Ismail, Group Managing Director of the Malaysia Aviation Group, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Jemana Bersechi.
Welcome back from lunch, everybody. I hope you had a good rest. Because strap yourselves in, we're going to have a very good conversation now about aviation and the power of partnerships. Engineer Badr, I'd like to start with you, and we will be talking about the power of partnerships and networks. But you and I sat down for an interview a couple of weeks ago. Since then, you've been on a record-breaking streak. Record-breaking earnings came through yesterday, posting a 2.15 billion profit for the year. Also put in a record-breaking order for Boeing jets when President Trump was in the region last week. I'd like to point that success down to our interview a couple of weeks ago, but I think that's not the case. But let me just start with the Boeing order, because it did grab a lot of headlines around the world. Why did you make such a big order? Do you need that many jets?
Jemana, first of all, we have started this process, as we talked in our interview, since March, April 2024. And we've decided to create some sort of a competition between Boeing and Airbus, and both engine manufacturers, Rolls-Royce and GE, to make sure that we get the best proposal or the best offer from both engine manufacturers and aircraft manufacturers. And it was a very close call between all of them. It was, and at certain stage it was leaning towards Airbus, then it went to Boeing. At the end, it was a very close call, and we decided to go to Boeing, who provided us with a better commercial and technical proposal. The reason for the order, it will cover the strategy of Qatar Airways till 2045. We'll start receiving the aircrafts from 2029 or May 2029. So basically, this ticks the boxes for us to continue our growth, to expand our fleet, to expand our network, as well as retire some of our older aircrafts that we have in our fleet.
Yeah. So not worried about overcapacity in a time of increased competition?
For the last few years, and from what we see in the industry, the demand is still there. We have demand that we cannot cater for. Our load factors are the highest in the industry and the highest in the history of Qatar Airways. We're talking about 85.6%. In certain sectors, we're talking about 95 to 96%. And we see this continues to be the case.
So it seems like you set in place an order that will cater to your longer-term vision. We're not going to see another order like this in the next few years from Qatar.
For the time being, this is the order we have placed until we see how the market evolves.
Let's talk about in your earnings. You mentioned strategic partnerships that you put in place. One of them, of course, is the 25% stake in Virgin Australia. One of the drivers that have contributed towards your growth strategy. How has this helped contribute?
The investment in Virgin Australia was basically, again, a strategic investment. As you're aware, for so many years, Qatar Airways struggled to get more traffic rights to fly into Australia. Australia is a very important market for us. We were limited to 21 flights on a weekly basis. So we have decided to go into this sort of partnership with Virgin Australia and have a wet lease agreement with them to add 28 more flights on a weekly basis. And by the end of the day, this is a win-win situation for all of us, Qatar Airways, Virgin Australia, and most importantly, the Australian consumers. We want to create competition which will drop the prices, will give the Australian consumers more options to choose from, and by the end of the day, the passengers will choose what's better for them.
Jane, let me turn to you. You were CEO of Virgin Australia at the time when this deal was announced, stepped down a couple of months ago, and so you were one of the architects of the deal. Just to pick up on what Engineer Badr was saying, that this ultimately isn't just about business, but also you have to think about the end user. You have to think about the Australian consumer. What are the final benefits to the Australian end user?
The power of partnership is pretty profound. And for Australia, bringing more options to consumers that will ultimately mean more seats available that you can choose to fly through Qatar to anywhere in the world means you're bringing value. So it's value and choice, really. And of course, Qatar Airways is one of the world's best airlines, one best airline in the world. I think, where are you at Badr now? 7 years in a row, 8 years in a row. We're really proud to have the opportunity to work with an airline of the stature of Qatar Airways. It's not only good for Australian consumers, it's also good for our people. I mean, our people, the day we announced this deal, were so proud because they realized that they were actually building an experience for consumers that was matching up with the Qatar Airways experience, and that was going to bring great value and choice to Australians to travel beyond Australia to the world. And I just can't be lost the importance of that to consumers, to our people, but also to the economy. Australians, roughly 11 million Australians were traveling out of Australia in pre-COVID. It's about a third of the total traffic in and out of Australia. So you need partners to be able to feed that traffic into your domestic network. People coming from outside Australia into Australia bring tourism dollars. For every dollar spent on a plane ticket, another $10 gets spent in the economy where you're traveling to. And so the knock-on benefits, it's not just jobs for Virgin Australia in Australia, it's jobs in restaurants and hotels, for small businesses who are now going to use the cargo space that's available because we've more than doubled the capacity on Qatar Airways by use of our wet lease services. It's just the benefits multiply, but it all comes down to a better experience for consumers and value and choice.
What do you say to those who have criticized the deal as Qatar Airways finding a workaround in order to get access to Australia?
I think you have to look at this from the standpoint of what it means to Virgin Australia, what it means to Australia, because the deal would not have been approved if it wasn't great for Australia. And that comes down to consumers. It comes down to the fact that Virgin Australia can't compete as well domestically if it doesn't have strong partnerships, deep equity partnerships with long-haul operators who feed in and out of Australia, because that means we can compete better for Australians who want choice for their domestic carrier to also provide international travel. With roughly half of Australians traveling every year internationally, that's what the statistics would take you to. I mean, some travel more and others travel not at all, but they want to know that their airline provides their end-to-end needs globally, not just locally. And so this is a profound impact to the Australian domestic aviation market, as well as being good for consumers and good for Virgin Australia.
Yeah. Captain Izham, I'd like to turn to you. Here we're talking about a different type of partnership between Qatar Airways and Malaysia Air. And in this case, I would describe it as a code share, an enhanced code share agreement, arrangement. And it's been in place for a few years now. When you started thinking about these types of enhanced agreements, what was the incentive? Why did it make sense?
Jumana, let me re-pivot back to Badr's 210 airplanes. Put a bit of context. The industry today, Asia-Pacific region, command about 38% of the global capacity of the aviation industry. And Asia-Pacific is poised to attain 50% capacity global stage. Now, with issues of supply chain, late deliveries of airplanes, and the new era of aviation that we foresee in 2043 onwards, where electrification, net zero environment, different technology. So what Qatar has built over the last 30 years actually is a pivot to airlines like Malaysia Airlines, a small little airline in the ASEAN region, to be participative in the global arena of aviation. So goes back to 2018, the time of when I was working with the predecessor of Badr. We see synergy, very strong synergy. Malaysia Airlines, with its checkered journey, needs a very strong brand to bring Malaysia Airlines up. And Qatar is the best partner. And today, as we speak, as it materializes over the last 6 years, Qatar fits all Western region. Malaysia Airlines, Virgin Australia takes care of the eastern side and Oceania. As we progresses with late deliveries of aeroplane, macroeconomics, geopolitics, that makes the supply chain very unpredictable, airlines today are shouldering aging airplanes. Today, average age of 14.8 years old, airplane in a typical airline. And typically about 5 years ago, average age is about 13 years old. So the industry, the demand and supply is not balanced. There's huge demand, there's little supply because of supply chain, macroeconomics, geopolitics, and what Qatar has done is to position itself to ensure that it tackles all this problem for at least the next 5 to 10 years. So there are 3 phases of growth in aviation, currently next 5 years, then next 10 years. So post-2040, you're looking at the different landscape of aviation. This is an opportunity for airlines, investors. There are bottlenecks in infrastructures like airports and many more. So the synergy with Malaysia Airlines, specifically here with Qatar, has been tremendous. To us, close to 30% of our revenue comes from partnership, not only Qatar alone. And that's the model that we realize is very key and important. To a certain extent, I just had a conversation with Jane last night about working with Virgin Australia. So partnership with Qatar, with the current state of position where the industry is facing due to aging fleet, supply chain issues, is a perfect match.
What about competition? Did you feel like it was necessary to go down this route in order to be more competitive?
Yes, indeed it is. So small airlines like Malaysia Airlines, we know where we stand. And we have a long checkered journey. And we have an ambition of the future. And of course, when you go this path, competition will be intense, right? But most importantly, both partners must be committed on the vision ahead, right? And that's very important.
Engineer, let me turn back to you. So Qatar Airways, Malaysian Air, Virgin Australia, all operating on the kangaroo routes. How do you see the outlook for growth there? And was that one of the decisions, your view on how quickly this part of the world is going to be growing, was that one of the considerations you took into consideration? When you decided to go for the stake in Virgin Australia, when you decided to continue along the lines of these enhanced cooperations with other airlines?
Absolutely, Jumana. We know, as Captain Sam said, there is a very high demand in the Far East, and we need to participate, or we need to take the opportunity to be part of this and to assist our partners. Add to this, we are restricted we have open sky agreements in Europe and in the US, while in the eastern part of the world we are limited, we are restricted by bilaterals, by certain number of flights. So in order to create this sort of balance between East and West, we had to come up with different ideas. We had to come up with different scenarios in order to create this balance. And the best scenario was for us was to create this sort of partnership with the Virgin Australia, Malaysia, JAL, and the airlines, the partners that we have and operate in this part of the world.
It's interesting what Izham was saying about also the supply chain issues being a factor as well. Because of the age of some of the fleets. Do you think that this is going to push more and more consolidation within the sector or your competition to go down this route of partnerships as well?
I think, as you noticed lately, Jumana, so many airlines are taking the path of basically trying to renovate and outfit their aircraft. They know their deliveries will continue to be delayed, and they know for them to continue to be play a very strong role and to compete with other airlines, they need to take some actions. Other smaller airlines, we have noticed they keep shrinking, and bigger airlines will take their portion of the business.
Yeah. Jane, when you're thinking about these types of partnerships, we spoke about the end user, and of course you're not just thinking about passenger travel, but you also have to think about other areas of cooperation, for example, sustainability. Is that what you think can distinguish airline partnerships today? So a deeper cooperation beyond just simple commercial terms?
So I think partnership in aviation started with the knowledge that no one airline could provide a network to the world for regulatory reasons and just sheer capacity to operate that kind of scale and volume. And so you have smaller airlines and you have bigger airlines, and the smaller airlines, it's really important to partner with the bigger airlines, and that's about network and that's about customers. But the reality is that it's much more than that. It's much more than that. It is, for us, with respect to our partnership with Qatar Airways, this enables us to think much bigger. Not only to think more strategically about how we sell and market, which we're in the process of doing, but also how we leverage each other's strengths and protect each other's vulnerabilities. And that's everything from sustainable aviation, that is thinking about how we manage fleet orders together, how we think about managing fuel challenges together, how we think about managing people and opportunities for people and ensure that we can attract the best and brightest, not only in our head offices, but also, in our cabin crew and pilots and all the people that work around the airports. It's a really important piece of the strategy to think very big and very strategic about how we use this as a game-changer opportunity to really create sustainable long-term competitive advantage.
Captain Izham, would you like to weigh in on the other factors that should be taken into consideration beyond just the commercial when you're forging these partnerships?
Jumana, it's very important. The subject of conversation today is partnership, right? First and foremost, it must be a perfect match. And your question just now with regards to does sustainability plays an important criteria for partnership? Indeed it is. Indeed it is. Hence, it is important for partners alike, not only driving towards commercial viability, we also need to ensure that strategically, airlines, partners, Virgin Australia, Qatar, Malaysia Airlines, we must fast forward ourselves to 2040, 2050, where we committed to net zero commitment, net zero emission. So as I mentioned just now, you can divide it into 3 phases. The current 5 years, really understand what it needs for us to be in the future. The second phase, which is 2030 onwards for 5 years, that's on the second 10th year. This is the portion of scaling up. Sustainability, technology, electrification, and so forth, right? Hence, partners like airlines is very key for us to propel in this direction. We must have that common understanding. Mind you, 2043 onwards, we're looking at a new era of aviation. There's potential for investors here to look at regenerating airports, air traffic management, brownfield, greenfield, and many more. So there are huge opportunities. So for partners like us, we must have that same mindset and journey, ambition moving forward for us to be responsible to invent the next era of aviation, which I predict 2040 onwards.
Engineer, I'm going to come back to you, but Jane, I do want to point out that in a couple of weeks' time, on June the 12th, the first Virgin Australia, apologies, operated by Qatar Airways departs from Sydney to Doha. That is the inaugural flight that is part of this deal. So you must be very excited to see that happen, your brainchild, and talk us through how momentous that moment is going to be for you, and also ultimately whether the Australian consumer can be looking at lower prices for those flights.
So a couple things on that count. It's going to be an amazing day, and in part because this is a journey that we've been on for some time. The relationship between Virgin Australia and Qatar Airways is now nearly 5 years old, and we've been building that relationship, building the partnership, and we've taken it to the next level, Badr and I. And it has taken a lot of effort to get it to a place where it's been approved, because it's so good for Australia and it's so good for the consumer. And now we're about to launch our first flights, and that is that's going to bring a tear to the eye for many, many people in my team, or my former team. And this is pilots, cabin crew, engineers. Like, this is such a special moment to again be operating long haul. And we're doing it with Qatar Airways planes and crew, but our people have come to Doha and they're training and they're learning how to operate within the Qatar Airways operation. And so we've got secondments coming in. And it's a very significant day. That first flight brings back for Virgin Australia connectivity to the world in a new way. And so it will mean a lot to all 8,000 people who work at Virgin Australia, and the pipeline of people who are excited to come in. So it's going to be a big day and a special day. And for Australian consumers, post-COVID, I mean, most people in this room fly a lot. And you will remember how expensive it was to go anywhere. And Australia in particular, business class flights were 2.5 times what they were pre-COVID, and economy fares were over 3 times what they were pre-COVID. And getting the capacity back is what brings prices down. And that capacity was sticky coming back for supply chain reasons and a whole bunch of other logical issues that the industry faced. But bringing more capacity in brings fares down. So fares now to Europe are back where they were roughly pre-COVID, which is such a gift to the Australian community. And Australians, like most around the world, have really suffered from cost of living pressure. Inflation's been high. Wages aren't growing as fast as inflation. And so people are doing it tough. So to be able to bring a bit of optimism and opportunity to the Australian community is just phenomenal. And that's Australians wanting to go visit family and friends, let alone the rest of the world wanting to come to Australia, which then creates jobs and opportunity and optimism, again, in the tourism economy and for small businesses. So it's very exciting. It's a big couple of weeks ahead.
Sounds like it. Engineer Badr, I want to end maybe where we started, which is with your profits and record-breaking profits for last year. What does this year hold? Given there are lots of positive discussions in place, the momentum seems to be there. You obviously are feeling good about the state of the world after the big Boeing order that you made. What does this year hold in store for Qatar Airways?
You know, this year, again, we're going through the same cycle. Last year, when we announced our record profit year by achieving $1.67 billion, the stress level was very high internally on how are we going to break this record or achieve the same number.
That's even more stressed now.
Yes, especially we're having, and we're going to continue with the same problem, I hope not, but the delays in deliveries. This is the geopolitical situation which nobody can predict or can handle. However, we will go with the same approach. Our team will have to take well-studied risks in order to operate and work to newer markets, to have a better operation in newer markets. We will also try to think outside the box on how can we make more profit and increase our revenue. It is promising. This April, which is our financial year, starts from April. April, again, we have recorded the best April in the history of Qatar Airways. May, we're going to record the best May in the history of Qatar Airways. From the advanced booking that we see for June and July, and I think we will from the numbers that we see, we can be comfortable to say that first quarter will be better by a big margin from the first quarter of last year. So this year is also promising for Qatar Airways. But I'm sure you have noticed in our record and our financials that our revenue has increased by 6 to 8%, while our net profit increased to 28%. This is where we managed to get different ideas in order to increase our profits, our bottom lines.
So the outlook is looking good.
Yes.
Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you to our panelists for this wonderful discussion.
Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Tony O. Elumelu, Group Chair of Heirs Holdings and United Bank for Africa PLC, and founder of the Tony Elumelu Foundation, and Tan Su Shan, CEO and Director of the DBS Bank Group, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Jennifer Zabazaja.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be on stage here. It's wonderful to be here at the 5th Economic Forum and to speak with Shan and Tony. Listen, let's get into it. This session is about the new growth playbook for banks, and both of you represent major banks in your region, in your countries where the banks are held. But so much of the day has been talked about a lot of the uncertainty that we've been seeing over the past 2 months. I wonder, from your perspectives, as CEO, let's start with you, Shan, of DBS. How do you plan for the back half of 2025? What is the playbook that you have?
So I took over as CEO a day before Liberation Day. And we came up immediately with scenarios. And you know, it's interesting. The trade outside the US, which we call TOTUS, T-O-T-U-S, it's actually still 89% of world trade. And so the playbook that we had was, we'll have to plan for every kind of scenario, from the worst to the best and the stuff in between. And then we have to help our clients to navigate. First order impact would be countries that are affected, obviously China predominantly, to the US. Industries that would be affected, which would be consumer discretionary, electronics, semiconductor, etc. And then figure out, you know, what the playbook would be for the first order impact. The second order impact, however, which was the bigger unknown, was number one, the increase in volatility, tremendous volatility in interest rates and exchange rates. Number two, the crash in consumer confidence. Number three, the huge volatility in markets. Global markets went down a lot, if you remember, it went back up. But it was this huge volatility that we had to help our clients navigate. And so most like uncertainty. We had a great, when I talked to all my colleagues in other banks, everyone had a great first quarter. But second and third quarter, everyone said, you know, our clients are pressing the pause button because nobody knows. I haven't heard so many CEOs say these three words, I don't know, as I have since April 2nd. Having said that, though, I do believe that in Asia anyway, a lot of Asian clients and Asian companies realize, look, there is a lot of trade to be had outside the US. Intra-regional trade in Asia is growing. You have a population of nearly 5 billion, a population that is educated, hardworking, and very AI-focused, and very much focused on the future. So if we invest correctly, and we look at, you know, other supply chains, you have to help your clients to diversify their risks. And with volatility, you can actually grab a really good rate or a really good exchange rate to help. And look at new supply chains and look at also new technology, tech stacks, etc. So it will be a bifurcated world, and we're just going to have to live with it.
Tony, before I get your take, I do want to give a homework assignment to the audience, and that is a poll that we are going to do. Shan was just mentioning a number of disruptive factors that we've seen first half of the year. So our poll question for the audience, hopefully you'll engage, what is the biggest driver of transformation in global banking right now? We have three options up there for you: disruptive technologies, currency volatility, and tariff and trade policy. And we'll circle back after this conversation to see where the audience is. But Tony, let's get your take on what we have seen in the first half of 2025, especially from the perspective of a CEO of an African bank, looking at really the macro picture right now.
All right, so I chair United Bank for Africa, and UBA serves 45 million customers across the globe. We operate in 24 countries on 4 continents, and we process transactions in billions on a daily basis. UBA is helping to transform lives on the continent because payments and access to finance are so critical for the development of Africa. But we're just starting. There's still so much to be done. And from where I sit as the chairman of this bank, I believe that the banking infrastructure is as critical, as important as in the transformation of the renaissance of Africa, as power, roads, ports. And the key thing is what we all need to do to have the banking sector, the finance sector, drives Africa's prosperity, drives Africa's transformation in the 21st century, given where we're at and the challenges that we see. So for me, there are 4 critical pillars we need to tackle. One is to make Africa a safe haven for savings. Mobilizing domestic savings is very critical for transformation of economies. 2 is to enable private global capital find its way into Africa, to help power investments that we need to drive the continent's economic transformation. The 3rd is capacitizing and improving our ability on the continent to transact and swiftly effect payments. Africa is a continent of about 1.3 billion people, and yet we don't have very strong, robust payment engine, which is where institutions like United Bank for Africa is coming forward to provide opportunity and solution for that gap. And lastly is what I call Afri-capitalism, which is enabling the private sector to drive, orchestrate, and lead the growth and transformation of the continent. I believe that these are things we need to do to take Africa to the next steps.
How do you think about African banks, though, in the context of what is developing a lot of new trade relationships outside of the continent? Where do African banks fit into that playbook?
I like the questions you asked. If I was looking at the currency, payments...
We're going to get to that.
And I'm telling myself, if I were to vote, which one would I vote? So for Africa today, African institutions, what we do at United Bank for Africa is because we see that there's a gap. Payments, trade. And so African institutions are building capacity, but we need to also partner with the rest of the world to have robust payment capacity to help transactions as well as facilitate trade between Africa and the rest of the world. For instance, United Bank for Africa will operate in the Gulf, and we like to follow Gulf businesses into Africa. We understand our ways around Africa. We want to handhold companies that are coming to Africa to invest. We also facilitate payment with the rest of the world. So we believe that in the 21st century, African financial institutions should be strong on trade facilitation, should help payments and transactions for the continent and with the rest of the world, and most importantly, be catalytic in the transformation of the continent.
And Shan, can you jump in? Because we were talking about the payment infrastructure that is a focus for DBS. Can you speak to that?
So, what do banks do, right? Banks take deposits and they lend it to businesses or individuals. And that role will be disintermediated by fintechs that can do unbanking, do something, one vertical really well. So for us to continue to be relevant, you have to be digital, you have to have your data in a data lake, and you have to have your AI models, and in time to come, which is now, be able to adopt the new generative AI technologies. So in order to continue to be relevant in deposit gathering, you have to do payments. That's both domestic payments and international payments. So today, most of Asia and most emerging markets now have real-time payment rails, which means actually your country-to-country payments can be atomic and instant. Today, with blockchain, you can also have cross-border payments to be atomic and instant. And, you know, gone are the days where you have T+1, T+2. It still is, unfortunately, in most countries. But I believe that technology today can help us to leapfrog and have real-time payments in small amounts. So with technology, with the global payment system, I do think that, especially after Liberation Day, many countries are thinking, well, in the past, you know, a lot of trade happened in US dollars. And perhaps if people are worried about having too much concentration in US dollars, then they might be thinking, I might need to have alternative currencies. And that's where I think, you know, increasingly now you're seeing a lot more trade happen between, let's say, the GCC and Asia in other currencies, including the euro, including CNH, etc. And I believe that diversification of currencies will continue to happen.
How have you seen currency volatility, in some cases strengthening in your region? How has that benefited the bank at this point in time? And then I want to get Tony's take, because the Naira's been doing something a little bit different. Shan?
Well, you know, in adversity comes opportunity.
All right.
And when you have volatility like this, and honestly, I haven't seen balls this high, and I've been in banking a long time, you know, if it's in your favor, grab it. So, for example, when interest rates fell right after Liberation Day, that was our clients' chance to lock in an IRS, right? Get your interest rate swap in and lock in a cheap, lower rate. And most of them did. For other companies where they have currency swings as well, again, using the FX volatility to lock in a rate. So we've came out with a product where you can actually lock a rate forward in your digital account. Just lock it, what you call it FX secure. So with technology today, you can come up with all kinds of interesting solutions. And high vols means obviously higher risk, but also more opportunities.
Is your expectation, though, for this to continue to be a benefit for the bank?
Well, you know, a lot of investment banks announced very good results in Q1 because volatility has been good. And I won't be surprised if April, a lot of trading rooms in banking made quite a lot of money. If you went the right way, of course. But most banks are long volatility. Most traders are long volatility today. And if you're long vol, I think you should do well. Is it an opportunity? It's both an opportunity for hedging, but also an opportunity to get your clients on board to make sure that they have the right diversity of currencies.
Let's talk about the Naira, thanks to Shan, because the Naira has had quite a bit of volatility, Tony. Yeah. Is the risk as great, though, for African currencies as the perception has been over the past few years?
I think first, for those who don't know, Naira is the Nigerian local currency. And currency volatility is a challenge for Africa and for Asia. This global south, fixing the volatility of our currencies will be very critical for ultimately developing our economies. So it's a challenge. And everyone thinking about a solution to that, hoping we can find one soon. But talking about Nigeria, let's break it down a bit, you know. As an investor, because beyond being a bank chairman, I wear other hats. I invest in the oil sector, the power sector, and hospitality and the real estate sector. What's important to people to a large extent is predictability. Let me know, even if the rate is, whatever the rate is, but let there be predictability. Let me enter the boardroom. Let's plan. Let's build scenarios. Let's be sure of what it will be. So in Nigeria, we've had currency situation, but in recent times, there's been interesting, encouraging stability. So we can plan, you know, and that is very, very, very welcome, it's a good development, and I'd like to see that continue. And for me, as I think of not just Africa, but Africa, Asia, that is very critical for every economy. Stability and ability to predict your currency is very critical. Now, you talked about gains. Yes, some people, there's gains when you have a volatility. There's losses also. But what's important is taking advantage of the opportunity or the challenge. If you find a solution around the challenge, it becomes an opportunity. If you see an opportunity and you take advantage of the opportunity to further strengthen your balance sheet, if you're a financial institution, even for non-financial institutions, strengthen your balance sheet and position because of that currency fluctuation and volatility, which will definitely come again, either in near term, mid-term, or long term. So currency is a challenge, but it's almost a constant for planning in Africa as it is in Asia. And ability to predict is very critical. And that is what I see in Naira today. I see Naira is becoming quite stable. And I have friends who live in the other OECD countries, want to do transactions with Africa, Nigeria in particular, and they are happy that there's stability and predictability of the currency. And we want to see it stable and, if anything, go down progressively.
I was going to ask both of you, what is the concern among clients that you are hearing for both of your regions as far as banking goes? Is it still a bit of this instability, Shan?
So I think the supply chain bifurcation, the sort of China for China and the rest of the world and you know, or the US for US, I think it's supply chain bifurcation that is an issue. In the past, if you made in China, you moved to ASEAN, and then you moved to Mexico or Eastern Europe, Poland, Hungary, etc. And today, the uncertainty of how much tariffs are going to cost wherever you are in the world is a big issue. And business people don't like uncertainty. So some of the deal flows that they were thinking about, they've pressed the pause button until there's more clarity around how much tariffs are from each country.
Are you seeing that globally?
Yes, but, you know, as I said, I think most people are also thinking, well, I might sell to the US, but I also can sell outside the US. I can sell in Europe, I can sell within ASEAN, I can sell intra-regional trade, you know, Emir, etc. So the opportunity here is to look for new supply chains and look for new markets. That's one. The other opportunity is really the use of generative AI, to reduce costs and increase productivity. And that, I think, in Asia, the leapfrog, the ambition to do so is tremendous. It's both an opportunity and also a challenge, because if you don't, you'll be left behind. And so a lot of our clients are looking at what's happening in Industry 4.0, right? How can an AI and Gen AI help industry to make manufacturing a lot more effective, a lot more efficient, a lot more productive? You have humanoid robots also creating, now in an aging demographic in Asia, robots and humanoid robots, smart humanoid robots could really be a game changer. You've got now AI-enabled biotech. That would be a very interesting, you know, again, life-enhancing new technologies. Deep Seek, we all know, the generative AI and deep tech, quantum computing, drones, flying drones, etc. So I think there are many new technologies. We all just have to get our heads around it. China's taken the leapfrog and said we're going to focus on these new growth areas. So I think what's happened is what Trump has done is created a desire to be more self-sufficient, a desire to be more resilient, and a desire to diversify. And this could, in the long term, lead to structural changes and structural investments that could help some of these Asian economies leapfrog. I think that's exciting.
What about within a bank, though, like DBS? Would you potentially see job cuts because if there's more integration of Gen AI? I mean, what does this mean structurally for an institution like that?
Well, you know, I keep telling my colleagues, this means all your mundane work that you don't like doing is going to disappear, which is great, because that frees up capacity for you to do more meaningful work. So in DBS, we've adopted both a horizontal and a vertical approach to the use of generative AI. So the horizontal approach is, we call it DBS GPT. That means anyone can tap into our data lake and get answers to policies, how do you help customers, etc. And then the vertical use cases, for example, the call center. Today, we used to have people like trying to check on, customer, where the customer journey went wrong. Today, with generative AI, the bot can answer those questions, or the customer can call somebody who can answer the question within 90 seconds, your problem is solved. So the vertical use cases. In the past, also pitch books were done by young analysts. Today, a generative AI can do that, right? In the past, we had people looking at documentary trade for documentary trade, LCs, etc. Today, a bot can do that. The bot looks at all the legal jargon, legal documents, and say, okay, this works, this doesn't work. And that just saves time. It takes out a lot of the grunt, mundane work that humans don't like doing, and frees up capacity. So I think I'm not worried about job losses, because I think, humans are so agile. And as long as you hire for people with the right attitude, then they will learn quickly and they will know that their jobs will change. But it's how do you stay ahead? How do you stay nimble? How do you have a good attitude so that you can unlearn, relearn, and embrace this technology? Because everybody else will.
So it sounds like ultimately you think that will be a benefit for the business moving forward.
So for example, the people who used to work in our call center or service center are now, we're giving them customers. And they can't wait, because I told them, I have so many SME customers, they don't have relationship managers, but if I could free up your time from the service calls, then you could look after, these customers for us, and own these customers for us, and give them a great experience. At the end of the day, we're humans. We all want human-to-human interaction. We just don't want them for mundane stuff like, oh, how do I change my address, or how do I, check on my payment, etc. Yeah. You want to have that customer-to-customer experience for more meaningful things, like how do I increase my sales? How can you help me in another country?
Yeah, Tony, can you jump in here from the region, disruptive technology?
So before that, I would like to say that Africa is an interesting continent. We have over 600 million people, 700 million people of the 1.1 billion Africans are under the age of 25. So employment, job creation is very critical for us on the continent. Also, in Africa, from the customers we serve, access to capital is so critical. And the headache or the challenge is, how do we create an ecosystem? How do we support the small and medium-scale enterprise on the continent so that collectively we all can help transform Africa by creating jobs for our young people? And AI has been wonderful. United Bank for Africa, we introduced AI chatbot, first chatbot in banking system on the continent in 2017. And we are moving further to generative AI. But what is critical for us is, if I prioritize the things that are important to us, I think that supporting small and medium-scale enterprises is very, very, very important for the continent. AI will assist that, but more importantly, I think they need access to capital and the infrastructure that they need to succeed. Electricity is such an issue. I listened to the conversation this morning here when the energy minister was talking about scaling up, even America scaling up to 100 gigabytes of electricity. The additional, for AI to do well on the continent, we need to even improve further the electricity availability on the continent. So for me, first as an investor and also as a chairman of a bank and an Africa capital, and somebody who thinks a lot about how to transform Africa, especially in the 21st century from within, ability to improve access to electricity on the continent is so critical to the development of Africa. Ability to improve payment infrastructure and system on the continent is so critical for the development of the continent. Ultimately, we need to create jobs for our young people on the continent. There's not time for any job losses, but we need to do a lot more so that we can increase the ability of the system to create jobs that our young ones need.
What role does the Gulf play in that, especially in your conversations as chairman of the bank? Do you think that plays a role in ultimately achieving some of these goals?
I didn't hear that.
What role does the Gulf play in investing here?
United Bank for Africa, the reason we have operation in the GCC is because of, in the Global South today, intra-South cooperation is very important. Trading amongst ourselves, facilitating payments and trade amongst ourselves, very important. Creating economic opportunity, attracting global capital. President Trump came and there was a lot of pledge, 1.1 trillion investment in America. And I was telling myself, that is the kind of investment we should be talking about for Africa, because Africa needs it more than America. Africa has a lot of opportunities. Africa has a huge population that is upcoming and very energetic and active. We need to do more on the continent, which is one of the reasons I'm here. And the message is very simple. There's a lot of private global capital looking for investment destination. Africa is now ready for the global capital to come in and make investments so that collectively the investments can help create prosperity for the investors as well as prosperity for locals. We see the Gulf as credible and historical partners to Africa. We welcome people from the Gulf states to come and invest in Africa. And recently, the Tony Elumelu Foundation, which is one of the hats I wear, which is helping to democratize law, create economic opportunity and prosperity on the continent, we signed a partnership with UAE to further support young African entrepreneurs. What I'm saying is investment, not aid. In the 21st century, on the continent in Africa, we have the market, we have the people. We have a lot of endowments. Let's collectively come together to harness this for common good of humanity, for benefit of the investors, as well as benefit for the locals. That is in my viewpoint, the most important objective that all of us should pursue, especially when we're thinking of the Global South and cooperating amongst others. So Gulf, and they are living up to expectations so far, so good. We're enjoying increasing business relationship between Africa and the Gulf.
It sounds like you've been having some productive conversations, but I'm just going to put that out there. Really quick before we go, I do want to circle back to the poll that we did to see if anyone participated after this discussion. Wow. I think we had some sway up here, not me, but clearly disruptive technologies. Shan?
Oh, fully agree. That would have been my answer too. I think disruptive technologies. I mean, as a tech-enabled bank, it's not just us using it, it's also us funding these potentially disruptive technologies and looking at these companies with a different kind of lens. You can't bring a traditional banker lens into financing these high-growth companies because you won't be able to fund them otherwise, right? So I have a whole team that just does new economy coverage. And they really look at different lens, what's the growth potential, who's your GP, who's your LP, who have you got to support you, who are your partnerships, and how can we help you grow, how can we help you leapfrog, where's your IP, etc. It's creating this ecosystem of success. I'm optimistic. I mean, being Asian, we're a pragmatic lot, and I guess fundamentally quite optimistic. But I'm so glad to see that the audience here voted disruptive technology.
Wonderful. We have to leave it there. Appreciate both of you, Tony Elumelu and Tan Shan. Please join me in thanking them for this.
Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Todd Bowley, co-founder, chairman, and CEO of Eldridge Industries, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Francine Lacroix.
Good afternoon, everyone. Todd, thank you for joining us.
Well, it's great to be back. It's great to be with you.
I've been waiting for this interview all of my life, so thank you for speaking to us. I know we'll talk a lot about football. I'm sure there's a lot of questions on Chelsea from the audience, but let's just, in general, start with Eldridge. I mean, where do you see opportunities? The world is upside down. There's a possible new world order. There's a lot of volatility. There's a lot of AI. Where do you go for the next opportunity?
Well, I think we try to find simple businesses that we can understand and, apply technology to them. I think one great example is what we're doing with Metropolis. Metropolis is a company that we started a couple years ago, where we came up with a facial recognition technology that could identify license plates. And basically, it's changed how parking works in the U.S. So you drive in, you drive out, you don't need to worry about gates or tickets or payment. And we charge a 99-cent convenience fee. And for that, we're going to make $180 per spot per year. So we just bought the largest parking lot operator, and we have 2 million parking spots now under management. And we've had $150 million of EBITDA. And if you look at $180 per spot per year times 2 million, we should be able to get to $500 million of EBITDA. But not only is that just good on its own, we're adding 30,000 members a day, right? People who are basically parking with us. So now we have 15 million members that, are using our parking spots and looking for them because the friction of use is so low, and they just get in and get out.
What kind of deals do you look for now? Because of the valuations, because of volatility, do you think you can find more deals on the cheap, or do you still just want to look for those plays that will make a difference in people's lives?
I think our funnel is pretty wide. I think we can invest up and down the capital structure. I never wanted to be pigeonholed into, oh, you have to do this or you have to do that, because ultimately you end up becoming, a derivative of the market that you're invested in. So, for example, right now we think investment-grade bonds aren't really good risk. I think U.S. Treasuries, long-dated U.S. Treasuries are interesting. I also think high-yield bonds, you're not getting paid enough for the credit spreads. Senior secured loans, I like. You sit at the top of the capital structure. So, the people are, because really when you think about where you play in a capital structure is just a derivative to the underlying assets. And where you sit is really just, what's the value proposition relative to the underlying asset. Because it all comes down to price and rates of return.
But is there something that you don't like in this kind of environment?
Well, I generally don't like investment-grade bonds because I generally think that their lack of covenants is pretty bad. And if you go back to kind of the 2005, 6, 7 era, LBOs were occurring, and they were rolling the investment-grade bonds and making them non-investment-grade bonds overnight. So I think they have low protections, and I don't think they offer any real yield. So I think I'd much rather be, senior secured credit in non-investment grade businesses, with much better documentation than investment grade bonds in a world where you're not sure what's going to happen to them.
Tony, you've also raised a significant amount of money actually in the Middle East. How do you see this region?
I think this region is the most exciting part of the world for the next couple of decades. I think the growth that's going on here, the energy that's here, they're great partners. They're very reliable and very stable. And, having been here last week with President Trump's delegation, just seeing how Qatar put on, what was just an amazing event. It's a testament to, the fact that, they're really on the world stage.
And this is what money that will be used in the region or actually deployed elsewhere?
Well, obviously, if you look at Qatar and the UAE in particular, they've done an amazing job building out their country, and their countries aren't very big. So as they continue to generate more and more capital, the likelihood of them investing in their own backyard, is unlikely at real scale because of what they've built out. And the fact is that prices just couldn't handle it. But I think continuing to help them build industries, we're spending a lot of time in Saudi right now thinking about the insurance industry, right? Because if you look at insurance companies, they align so nicely with infrastructure development. And, if you had a very large insurance industry, that would go a long way to help build out the infrastructure, right, which they're going to need for the World Cup and for the Expo and everything that's coming. So I think there's lots of different opportunities in the region, and that's why we're so excited to have offices here and continue to develop our activity here.
Away from insurance, is there anything else that you see as especially attractive in the next couple of years in the region and in Qatar specifically?
Yeah, I think continuing to develop markets. I think the reason that in my opinion at least, the reason that the U.S. is so creative and innovative and has so much interesting development and has, most of the largest trillion-dollar businesses is because we have the best capital markets. And capital market development is really what creates the funding in order to pursue ideas. So in America, any idea you have, there's a market for it. Right? So building markets like the securitization markets in the U.S., really allowed for non-financial companies to get into the financial industry business. And that was really a derivative of making the securitization market so competitive. So building securitization markets and continuing to grow markets and figuring out how to continuously fund ideas, I think that's going to be the next stage of growth for these markets.
But Todd, given tariffs and trade and the volatility we saw in the last couple of months, do you think it'll have a longer-term impact on the U.S.? We talk about U.S. exceptionalism. Without that being at play, do you just see a legacy staying?
I'm pretty sure that when everyone is telling me that one thing's about to happen, the odds of it happening are pretty low. And so if you look at the movie 13 Days, right, which talks about the Cuban Missile Crisis, and you look at the scene where, JFK is talking to one of the Joint Chiefs, and, he's basically screaming at the Joint Chiefs saying, do not launch this missile. Don't you see what's actually going on here? This is just, the president communicating with Castro. And to me, a lot of the tariffs conversation is just a communication at scale that's going on. And so, I'm not going to get so sucked into the day-to-day, right? Because, of course, what they've done is changed directions multiple times. And I think one of the strengths of, of our administration is that they are willing to pivot, when it's not going the way they like. So the fact that they've pivoted so many times so quickly, right, is a testament to, I think they're communicating at scale to try to figure out how to fix things. And the reality is, time goes by so fast. And, if you're the president, you have very little bit of time, and people will argue, well, it's not well planned, it's not well thought out. The problem is there's so many permutations and what can go on, right? It's hard to figure out exactly what's going to happen. So, unlike a lot of people that, seem to be, panicking over this, I'm pretty calm about it. And if you look at this over, it's a 20-year trade or a 30-year trade, right? You're never going to pick, the highs and the lows, and you're just going to have to kind of put your blinders on and, just stay focused on what's directly in front of you.
Todd, on Chelsea, is it fun owning a football club like Chelsea, or is it at times a bit of a headache?
I think it's a combination of both, right? But it's like owning anything. Almost anything I own is both fun and a headache. So I think this one's a little more in my face every day. But the fact is, the good news is the bad news, right? If people didn't care, right, then it would stink. So it's a testament to, how much the sport matters. And if you look at the Premier League right now, there's so much excitement in it, especially what's going on in the last weekend, right? Like, there's, 7 teams that could be making Champions League. There's going to be, the winner of Tottenham and Man United will go to Champions League. We'll have, a team, we'll probably have 9 teams in European competition out of the Premier League alone, which to me is just a testament to the quality of the product. And to be part of that is a privilege.
Is that what surprised you the most, since being one of the owners of Chelsea, and how, the level at which...
I think the level of competition is ferocious, and the margins of errors are so small. And I don't think I fully appreciated, the level, the margin of error is so small. I think the sport's gotten more and more competitive in the Premier League, and, that makes winning all that much sweeter. And, I guess I really didn't know how much I would love a goal. A goal feels so good. And giving up a goal is just the worst, right? It's like, in basketball, you can be down 20 points in the fourth quarter and feel like you're still in it. In baseball, you hit a home run and it's fantastic. But a goal, there's nothing like a goal.
Do you worry about the future of media rights? I mean, valuations in France and other countries have bombed. Is there a danger that the same will happen to the Premier League?
I think as long as the competition stays what it is, people all around the world. I mean, it's one of the few things that's sold into every market, right? So if you look at the Premier League media rights, other than I think Russia and North Korea, there's a contract to sell the content into every other country. There's nothing like that. So I think as long as the product remains so competitive and the management of it, and the reality is I think these things are just going to continue to grow. I think sports is going to continue to grow in demand. I think in the U.S. we're seeing it, right? College has become a new professional sport, with the advent of NIL. Arch Manning, who plays football for the University of Texas, American football, is going to make over $6 million playing football, in college. So I think the level of performance is going to continue to go younger and younger and younger, as people become more and more competitive.
Do you want to increase your role at Chelsea?
My role?
Mm-hmm.
I think chairman's a pretty good one. I can't play. Or maybe I'll go out as striker, see how the fans think about that.
But there's no, I mean, there's, rumors about you taking a back seat or anything like that. That's nothing that you're...
No, we have a good partnership. Of course, like every partnership, you have times that you got to work through and times that are better. And, I think we hit the ground running in such a, intense timeline, that it was just, a complex moment. But I think, we're through it and we're excited about what the future holds. We think we've got, one of the best young teams. We were early on doing kind of 7, 8, 9-year contracts, because we really wanted to make sure that we could keep the team together for a long time. If you read a book called Captain's Class, right, it talks about the 15 best teams, in the world. And I think one of the things that you see, is in order to have a really good team, you ultimately need stability, within the team, within the environment. And the only way that comes is through time, but I think we've set it up to be able to benefit from that.
So, I mean, I think we're going through the numbers. There are now nearly enough American-owned teams in the Premier League to get together to actually enforce, rule changes like matches abroad, salary caps. Do you see the American teams voting together to bring around some changes?
I think we believe very much in the culture, and obviously we've been educated, from the past. So we're very focused on making sure we maintain the culture.
What happens if the team doesn't make the Champions League again? Is there a risk that you could lose some big players?
We don't have any clauses like that in any of our contracts.
I mean, in general, what's the transfer window looking like? I know you can't give out too many secrets because there's a lot of people in the room, but are you excited?
I think, well, obviously we're going to the Club World Cup. So right now we're laser focused on the Club World Cup. We have some players that are joining us for the Club World Cup that weren't on the team. So, Andre Santos is coming from Strasbourg. We're really excited about, him and what we think he can add to the squad. The challenge that we really have is how many matches these guys are playing. The calendar is really tight and, they put in so much effort and energy. And the injuries are continuing to go up and up and up, so I think, we're going to have to revisit, how, what's the calendar look like and how much football, can they actually play? Obviously, they're built to play football. They love playing football. So we're trying to find the balance as to, what's the right amount of football.
Yeah, what's your ideal calendar? What does that look like?
That's not my job.
How much, we're getting laughs because everybody wants to know. That's what everybody wants to know. Will you spend big again in the transfer window?
Listen, I think we've done most of our investing. And, I think we're not looking at it as a spend. We look at it as an investment. And we're trying to build, the best portfolio of players that can perform, at the highest level for the longest periods of time. So, I think there's going to be, a lot of investment in this window, just what I'm hearing and what we're feeling. And there's going to be a lot of, well-heeled clubs that are going to be looking to add to, their teams. And I think that's only good for the Premier League.
So a more targeted approach. You have a lot of Chelsea fans actually out there.
Yes. I think we know what we need to do. We know the places that we need to invest. So, that's going to be our focus.
Todd, I mean, when looking at sports, you're also part owner of the Dodgers. I mean, there's so much more emotion, right, than parking lots or anything like.
Yeah.
I mean, is that how you build a portfolio, like a bit of emotion, a bit less emotion?
You know, I think early on we looked at this and said, let's have our strategy be really simple. Like, what do people need and what do people want? And so I think if you look at, we started a company called A24 from scratch. You know, in 2012, we put up $19 million, and A24 is probably the #1 independent film and TV company in America now. And so, you know, getting behind the right leaders, the right managers, the right CEOs, the right creatives, you know, I think all those things are applicable in almost every industry. You know, whether you're doing product development or, you know, TV and film development, you know, I think that you realize even like finance, people don't think of finance as a creative business, you know, but I think it's super creative.
Less emotional than football. Maybe we can agree on that.
Losing money is a painful thing.
I mean, how are the differences with Clear Lake on stadium development at Chelsea?
I think long term we just have to figure out. We recognize that a club like Chelsea needs a 65,000 person stadium. And we also recognize that that's going to be important to be able to compete long term. You know, so I think we'll figure that out.
I know I have a cricket question, because you and a consortium are basically won a bidding round for a team in Nottingham, but the whole process is yet to complete. Are you confident that that will be completed with a positive outcome for you?
You know, I think cricket is a really exciting sport, and you look at what's going on in India, and you look at the media rights in India, and you look at the ability to expand it globally, and I think, you know, we're in the early innings of cricket, but obviously, you know, when you look at the size and scale of India, you know, to be able to export that game around the world, right, and who knows, I think the convergence of cricket and baseball is also really intriguing, right, because it's a similar skill set. You know, and we now have, you know, in Uganda, you know, we have a Dodger facility. So we just signed our first African player to a professional contract. And I think that's, you know, really exciting as we continue to export these sports all around the world.
But on cricket, if London Spirit became available, would you rather buy that instead of the Nottingham team?
I mean, you know, I think the guys that wanted to buy London Spirit were really clear that they were going to buy it. And, you know, I don't like to get in front of trucks.
That's a good life, generally a good life lesson. You know, the president likes baseball. I mean, again, because you own the Dodgers, Pete Rose, should he be elected to the Hall of Fame?
This is a super controversial discussion. You know, my point of view is, and I don't know, I'm not an expert on it, and I don't know all the ins and outs, but if the baseline was, you know, he was one of the best players ever, he had more hits than anyone, he only bet on his team, he only did it as a manager, not a player. If those things are all true, then I wouldn't have any problem with him in the Hall of Fame. And you know, I think you know, the challenge that, you know, he offers people is, I think perhaps he didn't have any remorse. So the not having remorse about, you know, the rules that he violated, you know, but I don't think, you know, assuming that he was betting only on his own team, you know, I don't know why inherently that's more evil than, you know, performance-enhancing drugs for improving drugs, for example.
Todd, when you look at sports around the world, is there anything else that you find, you know, exciting, or where we could see you get involved in the future?
I mean, I think really focusing on developing, you know, we own something called the St. James in Washington, D.C., and it's basically 500,000 square feet of athletic facilities, and we've got the best facilities. We've got 8 basketball courts, we've got pools, we've got diving boards, we've got a field house, we do, you know, both, you know, football and European football matches in there. We've got a health club, you know, and our morning business is fantastic. Our afternoon business is fantastic. Our summer camps are fantastic. And now what we've built is a school. And so we utilize every day part. And because we have the best real estate and it's all indoors, right, we can basically get the best coaches. Right. And if we can get the best coaches, we can get the best athletes. And as, you know, NIL and the professional elements of sports and compensation move to younger and younger, you know, we're seeing more and more demand. I mean, we've got 2 sheets of ice for hockey at the St. James, and they're filled up every day. I mean, you just can't get enough ice time, right? So when we look at, I want to grow that business because, again, I'm not really worried about AI displacing that. Every one of them will be kind of roughly 100 million of revenue and 40 million of EBITDA, and if we had 30 of those, right, you know, that's before we start thinking about sponsorship opportunities and other benefits, because once you have a fleet of St. James, you'll have a, quite a moat.
Todd, we have 15 seconds left. Greatest sports person of all time you'd like to meet, and what would you ask them or tell them?
Well, it's not really going to resonate with this audience probably, but there was a gentleman by the name of Dan Gable, and Dan Gable was probably one of the best wrestlers of all time, and as a wrestler, I admire Dan Gable. He was undefeated all the way through college, and unfortunately he lost his very last match. But the guy was just tough as nails, and he built Iowa into the best wrestling program. So as a young wrestler, I was so aspirational of Iowa, and I would just ask him, what was it like to dominate day in and day out, just kind of like our Chelsea women just did.
There you go. That's a perfect way to end. Todd Boehly, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. Thank you.
Elon Musk goes. Perhaps you've heard of it.
The overall goal here with the Doge team is to help address the enormous deficit. It's not an optional thing, it is an essential thing.
Donald Trump needs his fall guy, but he also needs the bulldogs, and sometimes they're the same person.
The people voted for major government reform. If we don't do this, America will go bankrupt. We do need to delete entire agencies.
He's a big businessman. He's a successful guy. That's why we want him doing this.
I think this could be the greatest administration since the founding of the country.
Please welcome to the forum, Elon Musk, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Michelle Hussein.
Hello, everyone. And Elon Musk, welcome to Qatar Economic Forum. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm fine. How are you?
Very well, thank you, and very pleased to have you with us. You know, among those here in the audience in Doha are some you will know, people who have backed you financially over the years. Since you last spoke here in 2022, a lot has changed in your life. You're not only running multiple companies, you were doing that then, but now you also have a role in government. So first of all, I hope you won't mind if from time to time I have to move you from one topic to another, because we have a lot to cover in the time we have. That will be all right? Okay.
Yeah,
well, let's start then with exactly the fact that you now have this combination of being a CEO and having a role as a government advisor. Tell me about your week. How does it work? What's the split of your time?
Well, I travel a lot. So I was in Silicon Valley yesterday morning. I was in LA yesterday evening. I'm in Austin right now. I'll be in DC tomorrow. I'll be there having dinner with the president tomorrow night, I believe. And then a whole bunch of cabinet secretary meetings, and then back to Silicon Valley on Thursday night.
But I mean, the balance of your time, is it, well, clearly it's a lot, but is it still the case, as you said a while ago, that it's about 1 to 2 days a week on your government work?
Yeah, that's correct.
And what does that mean for your corporate life? Because if we start with Tesla, the company has suffered in recent months what you've called blowback. So what is your plan for turning that around, the declining sales picture, and by what stage do you think you're going to be able to turn it around?
Oh, it's already turned around.
Give me some evidence for that. I've just been looking at the sales figures for Europe in April, which show very significant declines in the big markets.
Europe is our weakest market. We're strong everywhere else. No, our sales are doing well at this point. We don't anticipate any meaningful sales shortfall, and obviously the stock market recognizes that, since we're now back over $1 trillion in market cap. So clearly the market is aware of the situation. So it's already turned around.
But sales still down compared to this time last year.
In Europe.
In Europe, okay. And
yes, but that's true of all manufacturers. There's no exceptions.
Does that mean that you're not going to be able? Does that mean
European market is quite weak?
Okay, but you would acknowledge, wouldn't you, that what you are facing, okay, let's just take it as Europe, what you are facing is a significant problem. This Tesla was an incredibly aspirational brand. People identified with it. They saw it as being at the forefront of the climate crisis, and now people are driving around with stickers in their cars saying, I bought this before we knew Elon was crazy.
And there are also people who are buying it because Elon's crazy, or however they may view it. So yes, we've lost some sales perhaps on the left, but we've gained them on the right. The sales numbers at this point are strong, and we see no problem with demand.
So what do you...
And I mean, you can just look at the stock price. If you want the best inside information, the stock market analysts have that, and our stock wouldn't be trading near all-time highs if it was not, if things weren't in good shape. They're fine. Don't worry about it.
Okay. I was citing sales figures rather than share price. Well, tell me then how committed you are to Tesla. Do you see yourself, and are you committed to still being the chief executive of Tesla in 5 years' time?
Yes.
No doubt about that at all?
Well, no, I might die.
Okay, short of that.
I can't be CEO if I'm dead, so there's a slight amount of...
Does that mean that the value of your pay doesn't have any bearing on your decision?
Well, that's not really a subject of discussion in this forum. I think obviously there should be compensation for, if something incredible is done, that compensation should match that something incredible was done. But I'm confident that whatever some activist posing as a judge in Delaware happens to do will not affect the future compensation.
This is the judge who twice struck down the $56 billion pay package that was awarded to you. I think the value on the current value of stock options. Yeah.
Not a judge. Not a judge. The activist who is cosplaying a judge in a Halloween costume.
Okay, that's your characterization. I think yes. On the current value of stock options, I think the actual...
Justice according to the law.
On the current value of stock options, I think the value of that pay package stands at about $100 billion. Are you saying you are relaxed about the value of your future pay package? Your decision to be committed to Tesla for the next 5 years, as long as you are still with us on this planet, is completely independent of pay?
No.
It's not independent. So pay is a relevant factor then to your commitment to Tesla?
A sufficient voting control such that I cannot be ousted by activist investors is what matters to me. And I've said this publicly many times. But let's not have this whole thing be a discussion of my alleged pay. It's not a money thing. It's a reasonable control thing over the future of the company, especially if we're building millions, potentially billions of humanoid robots. I can't be sitting there and wanting to get tossed out by, for political reasons, by activists. That would be unacceptable. That's all that matters. Now let's move on.
Okay. Well, just one question.
Now let's move on.
Well, one question before we move on to other companies, which is that I wonder if some of what has happened to Tesla in the last few months, did you take it personally?
Yes.
And did it make you regret any of, or think twice about your political endeavors? Because it is...
I did what needed to be done. The violent antibody reaction, and I'm not someone who's ever committed violence, and yet massive violence was committed against my companies. Massive violence was threatened against me. Who are these people? Why would they do that? How wrong can they be? They're on the wrong side of history, and that's an evil thing to do. To go and damage some poor innocent person's car, to threaten to kill me. What's wrong with these people? I've not harmed anyone. So, something needs to be done about them. And a number of them are going to prison, and they deserve it. And more will.
You're referring to the attacks on Tesla showrooms, but I think...
Yeah. Firing bullets into showrooms and burning down cars is unacceptable.
Yeah.
Those people will go to prison, and the people that funded them and organized them will also go to prison. Don't worry.
But wouldn't you...
We're coming for you.
Wouldn't you... But wouldn't you acknowledge that some of the people who turned against Tesla in Europe were upset at your politics, and very few of them would have been violent in any way? They just objected to what they saw you say or do politically.
Well, it's certainly fine to object to political things, but it's not fine to resort to violence and hanging someone in effigy and death threats. That's obviously not okay. That's absurd. That is in no way justifiable at all, in any way, shape, or form. And some of the legacy media nonetheless have sought to justify it, which is unconscionable. Shame on them.
Let's talk about your other companies then and other business areas, SpaceX. I saw that you said in a speech at the West Point Military Academy recently that the future of warfare is AI and drones. And obviously defense is an increasingly booming sector with the state of the world at the moment. Do you see SpaceX moving into weaponized drones?
You certainly ask interesting questions that are impossible to answer. SpaceX is it's the space launch leader. So SpaceX doesn't do drones. SpaceX builds rockets, satellites, and internet terminals. SpaceX has a very dominant position in space launch. So of the mass launch to orbit this year, SpaceX will probably do 90%. China will do the half of the remaining amount, so 5%, and the rest of the world, including the rest of the US, will do about 5%. So SpaceX will do about 10 times as much as the rest of the world combined, or 20 times as much as China, and China is doing actually a very impressive job. The reason for this is that we are putting into orbit the largest satellite constellation the world has ever seen by far. So I think at this point, about maybe approaching 80% of all active satellites in orbit are SpaceX. And they're providing high bandwidth global connectivity throughout the world. In fact, this connection is on the SpaceX connection. So I think this is a very good thing because it means that we can provide low-cost, high-bandwidth internet to parts of the world that don't have it or where it's very expensive. And I think the single biggest thing you can do to lift people out of poverty and help them is giving them an internet connection. Because once you have the internet connection, you can learn anything for free on the internet, and you can also sell your goods and services to the global market. Once you have knowledge by the internet and the ability to engage in commerce, that this is going to greatly improve quality of life for people throughout the world, and it has. And I'd just like to thank anyone in the audience who may have been helpful in, with Starlink and getting it to approved in their country. And I think it's doing a lot of good in the countries that have approved it, which is, I think at this point, 130 countries are very happy with it. I don't currently anticipate SpaceX getting into the weapons business. That's not an aspiration. We're frequently asked to do weapons programs, but we have thus far declined.
Do you envisage SpaceX or indeed Starlink as a separate entity publicly listing in the near future or at all?
It's possible that Starlink may go public at some point in the future.
And what would be the time frame?
Starlink.
What kind of time frame are you considering?
I'm in no rush. I'm in no rush to go public. Public is, I guess, a way to potentially make more money, but at the expense of a lot of public company overhead and inevitably a whole bunch of lawsuits, which are very annoying. So really something needs to be done about the shareholder derivative lawsuits in the U.S. Because it allows plaintiffs' law firms who don't represent the shareholders to pretend that they represent the shareholders by getting a puppet plaintiff with a few shares to initiate a massive lawsuit against the company. And the irony being that, extreme irony, that even if the class they purport to represent were to vote that they don't want the lawsuit would still continue. So how can it be a class action representing a class if the class would vote against it? And that's the bizarre situation we've got in the U.S. It's a dire need of reform. As anyone who's run a public company experienced this, it's an absurd situation that needs to change.
Well, do you think Donald Trump might change it? You've certainly got his ear. I imagine that you've put this to him. Is this something you're trying to change before any Starlink IPO?
Well, it would need a law to be passed. But the trouble being that you need 60 Senate votes, and the Democrats will vote against it. The plaintiff's bar is, I believe, the second largest contributor to the Democratic Party. That's the issue. At the state level, this can be solved. And I should say, Texas recently passed a law which, at least the state level, made lawsuits much more reasonable, because you have to get at least 1 in 33 shareholders to agree that they are part of a class of shareholders. 3%. Okay. This will really help with frivolous lawsuits.
Okay. Let's talk about AI, which is in so many of your businesses and in all our worlds in different ways. It's one of the big changes, the development of generative AI, since you last spoke to this forum 3 years ago. You're in this space, of course, with Grok, which almost everyone will know. You co-founded OpenAI and then left, and you've obviously got a legal battle with OpenAI and Sam Altman. I wonder if you could say something about the status of that, because you were together in Saudi Arabia with the president last week, with Sam Altman. In the same place at the same time.
Sam was in the neighborhood.
Okay, so does that mean you are pushing ahead with the lawsuit against OpenAI?
Yes. So look, I came up with the name OpenAI as an open source and as a non-profit, and I funded OpenAI for the first roughly $50 million, and it was intended to be a non-profit open source company, and now they're trying to change that for their own financial benefit into a for-profit company that is closed source. So this would be like, let's say you funded a non-profit to help preserve the Amazon rainforest, but instead of doing that, they became a lumber company, chopped down the forest, and sold the wood. You'd be like, wait a second, that's not what I funded. That's OpenAI.
They've made some changes to their corporate structure, though, haven't they, since, in recognition of what you've said? And
no, that's just what they told the media.
Okay. They have partly walked back their plan to restructure the business. I guess that's made no difference to how you feel about it. So you're determined to see them in court?
Of course.
Okay. Well, that's certainly going to be one to watch. I also wanted to ask you about AI and regulation, because when you were here last talking to John Micklethwaite, you had some pretty strong words about the risk that AI poses, and you said that you really felt what the US was missing was a federal AI regulator, that something along the lines of the Food and Drug Administration or the Federal Aviation Administration. Now, you're clearly now in a zone where you're more on the cutting regulation side than wanting new regulators. So has your view changed on the need for an AI regulator?
Well, it's not that I don't think there should be regulators. You can think of regulators like referees on the field in sports. There should be some number of referees, but you shouldn't have so many referees that you can't kick the ball without hitting one. In most fields in the U.S., the regulatory burden has grown over time to the point where it's like having more referees than players on the field. And this is a natural consequence of an extended period of prosperity. It's very important to appreciate this. This has happened throughout history. When you have an extended period of prosperity with no existential war, there's no cleansing function for unnecessary laws and regulations. So what happens is that every year more laws and more regulations are passed because legislators are going to legislate, regulators are going to regulate, and you'll get the steady pile of more and more laws and regulations over time until everything is illegal. And let me give you an example of a truly absurd situation. Under the Biden administration, SpaceX was sued for not hiring asylum seekers in the U.S. Now, the problem is it's actually illegal for SpaceX under ITAR, International Traffic in Arms Regulations, to hire anyone who is not a permanent resident of the United States, because the premise being that they will take advanced rocket technology and return to their home country if they're not a permanent resident. So we're simultaneously in a situation where it is illegal to hire asylum seekers and is also illegal to hire asylum seekers. And the Biden's Department of Justice chose to prosecute us despite both paths being illegal. Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
But my question was specifically about a regulator for AI, which you said 3 years ago was needed, and you said we need to be proactive on the regulation of AI rather than reactive. Have you changed your mind on that?
No, of course not. No, of course not. What I'm saying is that there should be some referees on the field, a few referees, but you shouldn't have a field jam-packed with referees such that you could not kick a ball in any direction without hitting one. So the fields that have been around for a long time, such as automotive, so aerospace, the sort of food and drug industries, are over-regulated, but the new fields, like artificial intelligence, are under-regulated. In fact, there is no regulator at all.
So there should be.
So
Do you still think that?
Yes, I'm simply saying, which I think is just basic common sense, that you want to have at least you want to have a few referees in the field. You don't want to have an army of referees, but you want to have a few referees on any given field, in any given sport, or even any given arena, industrial arena, to ensure that public safety is taken care of, but you don't want to have. So there's a proper number of referees. Like I said, it's actually very easy to visualize this when compared to sports. If the whole field is packed with referees, that would look absurd. But if there were no referees at all, your game's not going to be as good.
Okay, so let's then talk about your new world, your role advising government. You are in this unique and unprecedented position of having billions of dollars worth of contracts with the federal government yourself, mostly through SpaceX, and also now an insider's knowledge of it because of DOGE. Can you see that there is a conflict of interest or a potential conflict of interest in broad terms just through that very fact?
I don't think so, actually. There have been many advisors throughout history and the U.S. government and others who have had economic interests. And I am simply an advisor. I don't have formal power. And that's it. The president can choose to accept my advice or not. And that's how it goes. If there's a single contract that any of my companies have received that people think is somehow not was awarded improperly, it would immediately be front page news, to say the least. And if I didn't mention it, certainly my competitors would. So if you're not seeing that, then clearly there's not a conflict of interest.
There's another way, though, to look at it, that, for example, you have many competitors, whether it's companies like Boeing or companies who would like to do more of the kind of work you do for NASA, Blue Origin, Rocket Lab, and because DOGE is in every federal government department, you or people who work for DOGE, and you are the driving force behind it, have an insight into those companies' affairs and those companies' relationships with the federal government.
No, all we do is we review the organization to see if the organization has departments that are no longer relevant, and then are the contracts that are being awarded good value for money. In fact, frankly, the bar is not particularly high. Is there any value for money in a contract? And if there isn't, then we make recommendations to the secretary. The secretary can then choose to take those actions or not take those actions, and that's it. And then any action that is as a function of DOGE is posted to the DOGE website and to the doge.gov or at DOGE handle on the X platform. So it's complete transparency, and I've not seen any case where, to the best of my knowledge, there's even been an accusation of conflict, because it is completely and utterly transparent. That's it.
And what about the international dimension? Now, let's think about Starlink. Starlink is obviously a very, very good internet service. It's sought after all over the world. It's critical to the front line in Ukraine. It has also had more contracts coming its way, and there is some evidence that companies are allowing access to it because they want to be close to the Trump administration and send the right signal. So Bloomberg broke news today that the South African government is working around the rules on black ownership in order to allow Starlink in, and that is being done on the eve of the visit that President Ramaphosa is going to make to the White House. Do you recognize that as a conflict of interest?
No, of course not. First of all, you should be questioning why are there racist laws in South Africa? That's the first problem. That's what you should be attacking. It's improper for there to be racist laws in South Africa. The whole idea with what Nelson Mandela, who was a great man, proposed was that all races should be on an equal footing in South Africa. That's the right thing to do, not to replace one set of racist laws with another set of racist laws, which is utterly wrong and improper. So that's the deal, that all races should be treated equally, and there should be no preference given to one or the other. Whereas there are now 140 laws in South Africa that give that basically give strong preference to if you're a black South African, and not otherwise. And so now I'm in this absurd situation where I was born in South Africa but cannot get a license to operate in Starlink because I'm not black.
Well, it looks like that's about. Looks like that's about to change.
I just asked you a question. Please answer. Does that seem right to you?
Well, those rules were designed to bring.
Yes or no?
Those rules were designed to bring about an era of more economic equality in South Africa, and it looks like the government has found a way around those rules for you.
I asked you a question.
This is your interview. Everyone wants to hear from you.
I asked you a question. Yes or no?
Not for me.
Laws, yes or no?
Not for me to answer. I have got a question for you about your government work there and the amount of savings.
Why do you like racist laws?
This is not for me to answer. Come on.
Yes, it is.
Now, you wouldn't be trying to dodge a question.
You have to ask a question. I answer my question. No, you answer mine.
I think if you... I'm sure you can have that conversation directly with the South African government if you want to. I want to ask you about the total...
I can't believe it. That's not good.
I want to ask you about the total amount...
How do you like racist laws?
I want to ask you about the total amount that you're planning to save through DOGE's work. Before the election, you said it was going to be at least $2 trillion. The number currently on doge.gov is $170 billion. That's a big change. What happened to the $2 trillion?
Well, do you expect it to happen immediately?
Well, is it going to happen? Because Doha is supposed to run till next July.
I mean, your question is absurd in its fundamental premise. Are you assuming that on day, within a few months, this an instant $2 trillion saved?
No, I'm not at all. I'm just asking, is that still your aim then? Is it still your aim to get to $2 trillion?
The amount of time? Have we not made good progress given the amount of time?
That's exactly what I'm asking. So is it still your aim to go from 170 billion to 2 trillion?
The ability of Doge to operate is a function of whether the government, and this includes the Congress, is willing to take our advice. We're not the dictators of the government, we are the advisors. And so we can advise, and the progress we've made thus far, I think, is incredible. The Doge team has done incredible work. But the magnitude of the savings is proportionate to the support we get from Congress and from the executive branch of the government in general. So we're not the dictators, we are the advisors. But thus far, for advisors, the Doge team, to their credit, has made incredible progress.
You've talked about $4 billion a day being saved, but that won't get, which is, and I think everyone can agree that combating waste and inefficiency in government is a very good thing. But if you add that up, it's not going to get to 2 trillion over the lifetime of Doge.
I'm sorry?
The 4 billion a day, if Doge is going to run till next July, is not going to get you to $2 trillion. But you still say it's your aim, so we'll take that as read.
There's what Doge. I mean, I feel you're somewhat trapped in the NPC dialogue tree of a traditional journalist. So it's difficult when I'm conversing with someone who's trapped in the dialogue tree of a conventional journalist, because it's like talking to a computer. Doge is an advisory group. We are doing the best we can as an advisory group. The progress made thus far as an advisory group is excellent. I don't think any advisory group has done better in the history of advisory groups of the government. We do not make the laws, nor do we control the judiciary, nor do we control the executive branch. We are simply advisors. In that context, we are doing very well. Beyond that, we cannot take action beyond that, because we are not some sort of imperial dictator of the government. There are 3 branches of the government that are to some degree opposed to that level of cost savings. But nonetheless, let's not criticize whether there's 4 trillion, and instead look at the fact that 160 billion has been saved, and more will be saved too.
And as I said, I think everyone can agree that cutting waste and indeed fraud in any government and being responsible with taxpayers' money is a very good thing. So yes. I can see that you're proud of that work. I do want to ask you about US aid and the comments that Bill Gates made the other day, and I know that you called him.
Yeah, he's a huge liar.
I know you've said that already.
That's
I wondered.
Also,
and I'm just.
Who does Bill Gates think he is to make comments about the welfare of children, given that he frequented to Jeffrey Epstein?
Okay, well, he said he regrets those, and he spent a lot of his own money on philanthropy around the world over the years. My question to you is: have you looked at the data to check if he might be right that the cuts to USAID might cost millions of lives?
Yes. I'd like him to show us any evidence whatsoever that that is true. It's false. What we found with USAID cuts, and by the way, they haven't all been cut. The parts of USAID that were found to be even slightly useful were transferred to the State Department. So they've not been deleted. They've simply been transferred to the State Department. But many times over with USAID and other organizations, when they said, "Oh well, this is going to help, children, or it's going to help some disease eradication or something like that," and then when we asked for any evidence whatsoever, I say, well, please connect us with this group of children so we can talk to them and understand more about their issue. We get nothing. We don't even try to come up with a show orphan, meaning like it's sort of like, well, can we at least see a few kids? Like, where are they? If they're in trouble, we'd like to talk to them and talk to their caregivers.
Okay, well,
and then we get nothing as a response because it's what we find is an enormous amount of fraud and graft.
Okay, let me put this example to you.
Very little of it actually gets to the kids, if anything at all.
Okay, let me put this example to you because you grew up in South Africa, so you'll know the impact of HIV/AIDS well. And this is why I asked about the data. The US led on international efforts to combat HIV/AIDS, treatment, prevention, and there's an initiative called PEPFAR, which is credited with saving 26 million lives in the last 20 years. It was part of the foreign aid freeze, then there was a limited waiver. Its services are disrupted, and UN aid says if permanently discontinued, there will be another 4 million AIDS-related deaths by 2029. So if you look at that example, which is backed up by data, in 2023, 630,000 people died of AIDS-related illnesses, then perhaps Bill Gates's figures are not wrong. Millions of lives could be lost.
First of all, the program, the AIDS medication program is continuing. So your fundamental premise is wrong. It is continuing. Now, do you have another example?
Elon, not in its entirety.
It is false.
Not in its entirety. There's a limited waiver, and UNAIDS have said that not all of the services that were previously funded by USAID are continuing. So that's why I put that example to you.
Okay, well, which ones aren't being funded? I'll fix it right now.
Okay, well, actually, they're all on the UNAIDS website, so you'll be able to see them. But mostly they are to do with prevention, and for example, the rollout of a drug called lenacapavir, which was hailed as one of the biggest breakthroughs against AIDS for many years, which came out last year. So if you are, perhaps, I'm sure UNAIDS would be delighted if you're able to look at that again.
Yes, but well, if in fact this is true, which I doubt it is, then we'll fix it.
Okay, fine. So finally, your political influence. I wondered whether you have decided yet how much you're going to spend on the upcoming midterms. Is it you spent a lot more money on the last US election than you envisaged when you were speaking here 3 years ago? Are you going to continue to spend at that kind of level on future elections?
I think in terms of political spending, I'm going to do a lot less in the future.
And why is that?
I think I've done enough.
Is it because of blowback?
Well, if I see a reason to do political spending in the future, I will do it. I do not currently see a reason.
Okay. What about political influence beyond the US? How often do you speak to President Putin?
I don't speak to President Putin.
You've never spoken to President Putin?
I was on a video call with him once about 5 years ago.
Okay. That's the only.
Why would you think I speak to President Putin? Oh, you must. I get it.
Because
you believe the legacy.
Actually, I've heard you speak about it. For example, in your West Point speech, you said, "Oh, I challenged President Putin to was it an arm wrestle?" And I know the Wall Street Journal has reported your reported conversations.
Oh, yes.
If you're saying they haven't happened other than once, I'll take that as read.
Is there a worse publication on the face of the earth than the Wall Street Journal? I wouldn't use that to line up my cage for parrot droppings. That newspaper is the worst newspaper in the world. If there's one newspaper that should be pro-capitalist, it's the one with Wall Street in the name. But it isn't. So I have the very lowest opinion of the Wall Street Journal. Absolute nonsense. And you clearly believe the tripe that you've read in those papers.
I read very widely, and I'm putting these questions to you so that you have an opportunity to respond to them. which you are, and for which we're all grateful to hear your responses.
Yes.
Okay, we are out of time. So
you mentioned me challenging. I did so on the X platform. I challenged Vladimir Putin to single combat over the. But I didn't talk to him. That was a post on the X platform.
Great. That's why I asked you, and you've clarified and explained. Thank you. That's why I was asking whether you have had reported conversations, and you've said you haven't, other than a video call. Okay.
Typical legacy media lies.
Okay. Listen, I actually thought I might give Grok the last word, because when I asked Grok what your hardest challenge is, it said the strain of managing multiple high-stake ventures amid financial, regulatory and public relations crises. And I wondered whether you recognize that characterization and whether you do think that this is a pivotal year in your life.
Well, every year has been somewhat pivotal, and this one's no different. So, I mean, in terms of interesting things that hopefully are accomplished this year, getting Starship to be fully reusable, so that we catch both the booster and the ship, which will be the first fully reusable orbital rocket ever in history, would be a profound breakthrough, as the essential breakthrough necessarily to make life multiplanetary and ultimately become a spacefaring civilization. We've got Neuralink, which has now helped 5 patients restore capability using the telepathy implant, where they're able to control a computer simply by thinking. We'll be doing our first patient to restore sight with our blind sight implant, which is either end of this year or early next. In fact, that first patient might be in UAE, since we have a relationship with UAE and the Cleveland clinic there. I think on the AI front, we are close to what you might call AGI, or digital superintelligence. I think we are seeing an explosion in digital superintelligence here. And then we've got at Tesla we'll be launching unsupervised autonomy, basically self-driving cars with no one in them, in Austin next month. So it's a big year for sure. Many other things in the works too.
Okay.
I'm a technologist first and foremost.
Elon Musk, thank you very much for joining us here at Qatar Economic Forum. Thank you.
I'm not sure how I'm going to top that, everybody. Michelle, thank you so much for leading that conversation with Elon Musk. Everybody, we have now come to the end of today's sessions. It has been an insightful and engaging day filled with wide-ranging discussions and debates over the global economy, investment, innovation, and the future of growth. Now, before we wrap, we'd like to once again thank our partners and our sponsors for their generous support. Our official partners, Qatar Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Qatar Media City, our culture sponsor, Qatar Museums, our innovation sponsor, Qatar Research Development and Innovation Council, our premier sponsors, Qatar Investment Authority, Qatar National Bank, our knowledge sponsor, McKinsey & Company, our participating sponsors, IDA, HSBC, Investment Promotion Agency, Qatar, Qatar Financial Center, Qatar Free Zones Authority, Qatar University, our airline sponsor, Qatar Airways, our connectivity sponsor, Ooredoo, and our tourism sponsor, Visit Qatar. Now, we invite you to attend the workshop, Doing Business in Qatar, that is sponsored by the Investment Promotion Agency Qatar, Qatar Financial Center, and the Qatar Free Zones Authority. It will start shortly in breakout room 1 if you want to make your way there. Event staff are available to help guide you there. We are back here tomorrow, everybody. Do not forget, starting with breakouts at 8:45 a.m. The main stage programming right here will start at 10 a.m. I will be back hosting for you tomorrow. Please view the event app to select your sessions, and we kindly ask that you exit the ballroom and move to the networking area. Thank you again for being with us, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow.